fans, Nets Dog here with the latest in your Brooklyn Nets news. Are you ready? Here it is, NetsBoy's 200th episode. So let's go. Cue the intro.
His name's NetsBoy's, so let's gather around from all over. His name is NetsBoy's, so let's hear what he has to say. His name is NetsBoy, he thinks the world is all over. When the Nets just can't play.
Thank you for that welcoming intro there, Nets Dog. What up, Net fans? NetsBoy here, bring your latest in your 200th episode, Brooklyn Nets news. Here it is, NetsBoy's 200th. I hope you're all ready for it. As you can see by the title, this is the top 10 worst Nets players in the last 20 years as picked and selected by yours truly. I thought long and hard about what I wanted to do in this episode, and a suggestion from my brother brought up the fact that NetsBoy is normally really, really angry and upset, right? Everything recently has been pretty positive for the Nets. And, you know, that's great. And I'm great that everything's going well, and I'm pretty happy about it. But let's be honest now. The best moments of NetsBoy are always when I'm angry and yelling and screaming and just ultimately very upset. So I thought, why not just let the 200th episode just be the ultimate anger, release by NetsBoy, as we will now look back at the top 10 worst Nets over the last 20 years. Before we go into this, I do once again thank everybody, all my subscribers, all my viewers, everyone who comments and shares these videos. This has been over 6 years now that I've been doing NetsBoy, and 200 episodes later, I'm still going strong. And once again, just want to thank everyone. And there you go. So let's dive right in. As you also noticed that in the intro or in the title, it says part 1, because I'm going to be honest, I'm going to be spending a solid 2 to 3 minutes complaining about each of these players, and the fact that there's going to be 10 of them, well, that's over 30 minutes of me just complaining. And as much as I think that'll be entertaining, I think after a while that's just a little bit too much to cram onto one episode. So I'm splitting it up. This is going to be 10 through 6 of the worst players in the history of the Nets the last 20 years. And so let's dive right in. So let's start. I'm not going to do honorable mentions because the honorable mention list is very, very long and very, very deep and so on and so forth. But before I really dive in, I do want to stress that this is my opinion. These are my opinion of the worst Nets over the last 20 years. As I say several times, I've been a Nets fan since really much 2001. That's when I really was old enough to really begin to get into basketball, and I really started my Nets fandom there, especially when Jason Kidd came. So that's why it's over the last 20 years. I really couldn't dive deeper beyond the 2000s because I didn't really follow the Nets close enough to really have an opinion of other players on this team before that. So I'm sure there's a lot of other quote-unquote terrible players that played for the Nets prior to the 2000s. But for me, I'm basing it off of what I've seen. And once again, like I said, this is my opinion. So if I happen to talk about a player in which one of you love or like, don't take it personally. That just because I'm, complaining about them and bashing them does not mean they're bad people, does not mean that you don't have the right to like them. It's just for me personally, I really hated these guys. And James Harden is not on this list. I know I bash James Harden all the time. I'd be stupid to put James Harden on this list, okay? He's not on the list, all right? So he's not even an honorable mention. That'd be dumb. Just because I didn't like the guy in the past, I like him now. He's not on this list. So no James Harden. So let's go. Let's dive right in with number 10. My number 10 most hated Nets player over the last 20 years, a guy that was on the Nets recently. Speaking of the James Harden, he was involved in the James Harden trade. That is Taurean Prince. Now, look, this one he's number 10 for a reason. Torian Prince really wasn't that bad. You know, he played 76 games for the Nets, 2 seasons, averaged a little over 11 points a game, 5 rebounds a game, almost a steal a game, shot 43% from the floor, 34% from 3. Really solid numbers with Torian Prince. But if you remember in all my previous Nets Boy episodes, I always talked about how much I hated Torian Prince because he was the definition of an all-or-nothing player. And you're going to notice that a lot of players on this list are all-or-nothing players. These are the players that have all the talent to be, you know, an 18 to 20-point scorer, to be a very good, versatile two-way player, to be a third scorer on a team or third star or all-star caliber player, but they just aren't consistent enough. And Torian Prince, when he got drafted and played for the Hawks, everyone said this guy is going to be the next great two-way player. He has tons of skill set, tons of upside. They said he has a Damari Carroll type of game. You know, may not be an all-star, but a really good role player, a really good starter. And then he came to the Nets, and we saw that. There were moments where Torian Prince would score 25 points and go like 8 of 12 shooting and would be like 4 from 5 from 3. And you'd say, this guy's great. And he'll play great defense, great energy. And then he'll follow that up with a 1 for 7 performance with 3 points and like 4 turnovers. And you're just like, come on. Like, can't you put it together for a stretch of games? But he couldn't. And he would make some crazy shot one moment, a great fadeaway shot. And then the next moment, he'll miss a wide open 3 or turn the ball over or throw the ball out of bounds. He was just very inconsistent. But he's number 10 because overall he wasn't that bad. He played 2 seasons for the Nets, was an adequate rotational player, and, you know, someone who ultimately I felt like he was being set up to be traded, to be honest. I felt like when he signed the extension with the Nets, I really kind of thought that Sean Marks was basically giving him this big contract to trade him, and sure enough, he did. But he's still on this list because his inconsistency was so frustrating, and he was somebody that when he checked in, I was like, great. Here comes Torian Prince. So Torian Prince, number 10. Now, number 9. Number 9 is another player that's a little bit more recent with the Nets, and that is Allen Crabbe. Now, Allen Crabbe, similar to Torian Prince, he was kind of an all-or-nothing player. And Allen Crabbe, you know, Sean Marks tried to get earlier on, but the Trailblazers matched the offer sheet when they tried to get him as a restricted free agent. And later on, the Nets were able to trade for him. And look, Allen Crabbe was, once again, not a terrible player. Similar numbers, you're going to listen to Torian Prince. 11.9 points per game, 4 rebounds, shot 43% from the field, 37% from 3. Those aren't bad numbers. But once again, it was about the all or nothing. Allen Crabbe was all or nothing. He would either be, you know, like I said, 5 for 6 from 3 or 0 for 5 from 3. He was very streaky, and all we kept on hearing when the Nets got Allen Crabbe was the potential. The defensive potential he has, the two-way player potential that he has. He could be a key starter, a key player on a championship team. And let's be honest, we never saw it. Towards the end of his career with the Nets, he was out of the rotation. You know, he played in 118 games, 2 seasons, but down the stretch, he was out, and it's just because he was just too inconsistent. And other than shoot the 3 ball, which he did pretty respectfully, like I said, 37%, he wasn't really able to contribute anywhere else. He was an inconsistent mid-range shooter. He wasn't a great finisher, and though he had good length, he just was never the defensive player that the Nets were hoping he would be. So he's on this list at number 9 because he never became the potential of the player that I think we were sold that he would be on. Like when the Nets traded for him or got him, we were all kind of fed all these ideas that he was going to be a great two-way player. Never really worked out. But he's only number 9 because, like Torian Prince, respectable numbers, still a very solid rotational player on the Nets, but once again, a player that towards the end of his stint with the Nets, you just were like, all right, this guy's done. He's got to go. I'm kind of done with him. Right now, that's kind of like the way Landry Shamet is. And, like, honestly, I'm getting a lot of, Allen Crabbe flashbacks with Landry Shamet, but Shamet's playing much better right now. We'll see if that continues. Landry Shamet is not on this list. A little player comparison of what I'm reliving. So that's number 9, Alan Crabb. Number 8, worst net over the last 20 years. This one's a little unfair because he had a very short stint with the Nets, but it's Anthony Bennett. Look, Anthony Bennett, as we all know, could go down in history as one of the biggest draft busts in the history of the NBA. There's a lot out there. That's a whole other list for another time. But he very well could be the worst first overall pick ever. And when the Nets signed him, I'm pretty sure there's a clip of me, and it might be in my 100th episode, which is a clip show, which if you want to check that out and you want to see some funny moments or some good things, go check out my 100th episode, which, wow, that was like 2-3 years ago. I'm pretty sure there's a moment where I go, Anthony Bennett? Anthony Bennett? Are you kidding me? Why did the Nets need to sign him? He's useless. He's useless. Because he was useless. I mean, the guy played 23 games for the Nets, 5 points per game, 2.3 rebounds, shot 56% from the field, but 27% from three. He got some opportunities, but never really found his footing, just like he did in the NBA. Had opportunities in the NBA, never fully found his footing. He's on this list because, to me, it was just an irrelevant, dumb signing. You know, obviously, Sean Marks did it at the time because they thought, why not give this guy a chance? But one of the biggest busts in the history of the NBA, and he got to a point that when he did play in those few games and few minutes he played, it was just a disaster. And I just remember watching him get the ball stripped all the time, and like he averaged 0.1 blocks per game. How can you be a big and average 0.1 blocks per game, even in only 23 games? You think you would, with your size, you would have accidentally blocked someone at least more than 0.1 a game. 0.1 a game. But whatever. So he's number 8 because, you know, just a complete disaster. Barely played for the Nets, though, so that's why he's only number 8, because it's a little unfair to have him on the list. But this was just a guy, like I said, that when he checked in, I'm like, are you kidding me? Why is this guy even on the team? So that's why he's number 8, though, and not anything higher, because 23 games with the Nets, not that important, kind of irrelevant. So let's continue now on the list. We're flying through this list here. Number 7, another recent Net out there, and that would be a player who was recently traded from the Nets, John Musa. Now, I don't know how many times we've seen in the last few NetsBoy episodes last season how much I complained about this guy. John Musa, as a Net, played in 49 games, 4.8 points per game, 1.1 assists, shot 47% from the field, but 24% from three. And all we heard when this guy got drafted in the late first round for the Nets 2 years ago was that this guy is a great three shooter, and that this guy was the second most talented European player in the draft next to Luka Doncic. Are you kidding me? He shot 24% from three. He was completely useless when he played, and all we heard was he has all this potential. Young kid, he's going to figure it out. And every time he got a chance, he was complete garbage. I mean, I never seen a guy with so much hype be so useless. It's just the reality of it. And every time he came in, every time he got the ball, I'm like, here comes a brick. And the bricks he shot, I mean, when he missed, it wasn't even close. It was always hard off the back iron or an air ball or off the back. I mean, this guy was just, he was so frustrating. I was so glad when the Nets traded him. And not only did the Nets trade John Musa, they got Bruce Brown in the trade. What a great trade that was. Good job, Sean Marks, because Bruce Brown now is one of my favorite Nets. And, I mean, if I'm the Pistons, I'm thinking to myself, what the hell did we do? Why did we trade Bruce Brown, a guy who is now thriving with the Nets, for this useless piece of crap, which, by the way, John Musa's not even on the Pistons anymore. They released him. That's how bad he is. He couldn't even crack the rotation on one of the worst teams in basketball. So he was just unbelievably frustrating, and I'm so glad he's no longer on the Nets. And once again, he's on this list because of the hype. This was a guy who had a lot of hype, and that's all I remember hearing. Second best European player behind Luka Doncic. I said this before. If that means Doncic is way up here, man, I can't even go low enough to show you the difference of where Musa allegedly was compared to Doncic. Doncic is a superstar. Musa is not even worthy of cleaning his shoes. I mean, so glad he's not on the Nets. But he's only number 7 because, once again, did not play a lot of games with the Nets, only 49. And honestly, the benefit of the doubt I'll give Musa was that he's still a young kid. He's 22 years old now. You know, he still could get better. He still could figure it out. I think he's playing overseas right now, but maybe he'll get another chance. Who knows? So I didn't want to put him higher than that, but man, oh man. Man, did that guy suck. Oh boy. Which then takes me to my 6th most useless player as a net. Now, I'm changing the wording here, but worst net over the last 20 years. This one's going to be an interesting one. This one's a little bit more of a little blast from the past. Bobby Simmons. Bobby Simmons played with the Nets in the mid-2000s. He was actually part of the trade when the Nets traded away Richard Jefferson. They got Bobby Simmons in that trade from the Bucks. And look, 7.2 points per game, 3.6 rebounds per game, 43% field goal percentage, and shot 42% from 3. So that's pretty good if you think about it. 42% from 3, 7.2 points per game. I know what you're thinking. NetsBoy, those are respectable numbers. I mean, that's not great, but that's a rotational player. And my response to you would be, yes, but don't get misled by those numbers. 2 years prior to that, Bobby Simmons was a borderline all-star player. When he played with the Clippers, he averaged 16 points per game, 5.9 rebounds, 46% from the field, and 43% from 3. Yes, he had a severe ankle injury shortly after that when he signed with the Bucks, but he still managed to put up 13, 4, and shot 45% from the field, 42% from 3 his first year with the Bucks. So when you look at those numbers and you look at a player who's coming off injury, but still we were told he was 100%, you're thinking to yourself, this guy's got to be able to at least score 12 to 14 points a game, you know, and be a key contributor. I mean, he was replacing Richard Jefferson ultimately in the starting lineup. The Nets were trading away Richard Jefferson, and Bobby Simmons was coming onto this team to replace Richard Jefferson. Now, we knew he wasn't going to really replace it, but you thought he was going to give the Nets something. But in the 94 games that he played, he gave them mediocrity at best. And I also can guarantee you this. There was at least 1 or 2 games in which the Nets lost because he missed 2 free throws at the end of the game. Him and Jarvis Hayes could go down in history, and Jarvis Hayes is not on this list either. He very well could have been, but he never had that much hype. But him and Bobby Simmons, Jarvis Hayes and Bobby Simmons, could have 2 of the worst moments in the history of the Nets when the Nets were once up by 3 with like 10 seconds to go, and they decided that they would foul the other team so they couldn't get the 3 off. 2 free throws made, up by 1. And I remember both Bobby Simmons and Jarvis Hayes at 2 different times in the same year did this. And both of them, by the way, were part of that 12-win Nets team. They got fouled and missed both free throws, and then the other team won with a buzzer beater up at the end of the game. Both those guys did that. And that was the thing about Bobby Simmons. He was unbelievably anti-clutch. I'll never forget how many shots he missed when he was wide open. And this guy was supposed to be a great 3 shooter. He was also supposed to be a great defender, and he couldn't do crap. Like I said, I know he came off an injury the year prior, but this guy was averaging almost, 16, 17 points per game just a couple years prior, and he was coming to the Nets in his prime. He was 27 years old. And once again, we were sold lies. We were told that Bobby Simmons was a quality small forward and that he was going to probably average 14 to 18 points per game for this Nets team, this growing Nets team, with this rebuilding Nets team. He was going to be a good player to replace Richard Jefferson, and he just never did that. And even though he had his moments, and he was clearly not a useless player, to me, he never, ever was worth it. And I personally believe the Nets should have gotten more than him and another player who I will discuss in the next episode because he's on this list, for Richard Jefferson. And to me, it just never seemed like he deserved to really be in the rotation. And he was just a very, very inconsistent player. And that's another thing. Inconsistent. He was another Torian Prince, Alan Crabb type of player. He was another guy who was capable of scoring 20 points on one night and then give you 2 the next. But my whole thing is the potential and what we expected from him just didn't happen. And I just never thought he was anything other than just a mediocre player. So Bobby Simmons, he is number 6 on this list of the worst Nets over the last 20 years. So there you have it. 10 through 6. Torian Prince, Alan Crabb, Anthony Bennett, John Amusa, and then Bobby Simmons. That is the first part of my Nets Boy 200th episode. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you agree with me on my top 10, the first 5, top 5 of my top 10. And tune in probably in a day or two for my remaining list, the remaining 5 worst Nets in the last 20 years. Let me know if you think, well, I don't want to say let me know if you think anyone else should be on this list because there's a good chance that I'm going to be talking about them in the next episode. But just let me know if you think that these guys deserve to be in my top 10, my top, the top 5 of the top 10. And yeah, and we'll see what happens. So let's wrap up this part of this episode. Keep your eyes open for the next Nets Boy episode, and it should be in a couple days, part 2, right around the corner. So, until then, this is Nets Boy getting ready, because that wasn't even me getting that angry. I mean, I'm about to, blow up on these last 5 players. So get ready for it. But until then, this is Nets Boy, signing off.